Hello and welcome to this Jose Capablanca video. And today we have Capablanca and Alekhine before they were world chess champions. So this is earlier in their careers, and it looks like Capablanca has the white pieces versus black against Alekhine. This was played in 1914 in St. Petersburg, Russia. And Capablanca begins with d4, which he played more of later in his career. Before this, he did play some e4 openings when he was younger, but he was known more for d4, more strategic, calculating, slower maneuvering games. So we have d4, and Alekhine responds with e6 here. Kind of flexible, waiting to see what Capablanca will do. So we have e4, and as I mentioned, Capablanca, earlier in his career, he played e4 openings. So he would be familiar with this move, the French defense, and how does Capablanca decide to respond against this? Well, he plays knight to c3 here, and now we have knight to f6. So what is happening in the position so far? Well, this pawn is piling up on the e-pawn. The knight is defending, and now we have another attacker. So Capablanca decides to pin this attacker to the queen, and now we have the question being put to this bishop immediately. Here Capablanca has to decide, does he give up his bishop pair or will he retreat? But if he does, the pawn can push forward here, and then there can be a capture of the e-pawn. So because the pawn would push forward, blocking the bishop back. If the bishop drops back, the pawn pushes forward, the bishop would have to retreat again, and it would get rid of that pin. So, moving on. Capablanca plays the best move, capturing here. And now, what should Alekhine do? It looks like the best move would be to go ahead and capture with the queen, and that's what Alekhine does. So now white has two attackers on the d-pawn here. So, what will play out here? Let's find out. Pawn captures. We have a pin instead of recapturing. So that basically, nullifies this attacker. In case this pawn recaptures, the knight will not be able to counterattack as it is pinned to the king. So the game continues with a counterattack. So Capablanca ignores this pin on his knight, and now we have a counterattack on Alekhine's king. The pawn blocks, and now after capture, the computer gives this as being a great move. The pawn captures. Capablanca is now ahead temporarily by 2 pawns. So after the knight captures an inaccuracy, maybe Alekhine didn't want to break his pawns up prematurely. With this, he develops the knight. Although the bishop can capture the knight and break the pawns apart anyway. The computer likes b takes c6 because if the pawn would have captured, it would be attacking the bishop and driving that bishop back. So the game continues with Capablanca playing an inaccuracy himself here. He just develops another piece. It backs up the knight here. Also, backs up the pawn. So let's see what happens. Also Capablanca is ready to castle kingside. So Black castles the king to safety. Capablanca does likewise. And now we have rook grabbing the half-open file, lining up on the pawn and queen here. So the game continues with a counterattack on Alekhine's queen. So where should this queen go now? Well, we have queen to h4 lining up on this h2 pawn, which at the moment is only protected by the king. An inaccuracy as far as the computer is concerned. It recommended just queen to g6 instead, which would line up on Capablanca's king. So now Capablanca makes a mistake here. He captures the knight, which will, after the recapture, leave two isolated pawns on the queen side. Computer prefers f4 instead, pushing the f pawn, gaining space over here on the king side, also blocking this attack on the knight. So we have an unprotected knight here. So if we go back, that's another reason the queen moved here to target that knight, which it could have done from g6 like the computer recommended. So capture of the knight, the pawn recaptures, and now what will Capablanca do about this unprotected knight? Well, he pushes the f-pawn now, blocking this attack on that knight. And so the game continues with bishop developing, the best move in the position. Now the game's almost even though Capablanca is ahead by a pawn. We have an attack on the knight, and the bishop is lined up on the rook behind the knight. So how does Capablanca proceed here? Apparently c3, counterattacking the bishop, would be better here. And sure enough, that is what Capablanca plays. He fortifies the d4 pawn, attacks the bishop here at the same time. So that bishop retreats back to f8, and apparently this is an inaccuracy, that it would have been better to retreat to e7, where the bishop would be eyeing both of these diagonals. Although the bishop on f8 does defend the king from any future back rank checks. If there were to be any attacks on the back rank later in the game. So now we have queen attacking queen. Capablanca was known to be a great endgame player, and so trading off the queens would be fine with him. Also, he is ahead by a pawn, and when you're ahead by a pawn, or any material, it's usually good to trade off pieces. Whereas Alekhine being behind, he should work on trading off pawns. So the queen retreats back. Alekhine, known to be a great tactical player, keeps the queens on the board, thinking that he can use that queen for a future attack. So now we have rook up to f2, perhaps helping to guard the second rank, maybe a future doubling of rooks by bringing this rook up to f2. So Capablanca has to worry about the bishop pair, especially if the position opens up more, and Capablanca immediately pushes the c pawn here, attacking. Of course, the pawn or the knight could capture, and Capablanca would go up another pawn. Computer says this is an excellent move, but bishop capturing the knight here on e2, apparently that's recommended. So now we have knight captures, bishop captures after the recapture, which is an inaccuracy. It looks like it may have been better to play knight up to g3 here, perhaps to avoid any more piece trades, although the trades would benefit Capablanca. So now we have queen captures, an inaccuracy. It looks like, once again, the computer likes this capture of the knight, trading bishop for knight. So now we have the knight jumping up to this outpost. If the pawn tries to chase it away, of course, it could be captured. So now we have, or captured by the queen, I guess. So now we have the rook jumping up here to d5, maybe to assist with a future push of this pawn, to help get rid of the pawns. As I mentioned, Capablanca being ahead by a pawn, Alekhine would like to trade off some of these pawns. So here we have h3 giving Capablanca's king a little escape hatch here, or maybe also a way to bring the king up towards the action later in the game. So rooks double on the d file. We have the queen pushing forward, lining up on lining up on Alekhine's queen. And now the pawn does push forward. Apparently this is an inaccuracy, that it would have been better to play bishop up to b7, which would maybe prevent the knight from jumping up here in the future, perhaps. Also, it would line up down through here, through the center, towards the king side. All right, we have pawn capture. Computer says that's a great move, but it was kind of an obvious move. The other options were what? The knight was under attack, maybe retreating the knight back. But then that could allow the rooks to be more powerful in that open file. And right now the knight's doing a good job of blocking. So we have capture. The queen is being chased. So the queen creates a battery with the rook threatening to capture this pawn with check. And now we have queen dropping back to guard. But now we see why it may have been good to have the bishop up here, preventing the queen from creating the battery, and also covering this square, because now the knight can fork queen and rook. And that is the best move according to the computer. So Capablanca indeed plays that, attacking queen and rook at the same time. But first we have a attack on the king on the back rank. After capture, queen recaptures, renewing the attack. The king just presses forward here, where it can move up into the action later in the game, perhaps. So now we have the rook pressing up, guarding this pawn as well as the a7 pawn. And now knight drops back to its outpost, where it holds sway on many squares here throughout the board, and especially these four in enemy territory, although the bishop is guarding b5. So now we have the bishop pressing forward, the best move in the position. It prevents the knight from jumping forward here. Also, the bishop can drop back and defend this pawn, help guard the king side. So now we have, and let me go back to this. Okay, so also, especially for the beginners out there, the queen, of course, can't capture that unprotected bishop, because then black's queen, of course, would recapture the rook here. So the game continues with queen stepping to the side, lining up on the opponent's king, looking kind of dangerous. Also, there is the threat of moving the rook with a discovered attack on the unprotected queen. So now we have queen creating a battery with the bishop here, also protecting the bishop and attacking this b pawn. Now, according to the computer, this is a mistake, that rook to e7 would have been better, sliding over here eyeing the open E file. And so now we have queen to b8 checking the king. The king steps to the little escape hatch here on h7. And now queen attacks rook and attacks the pawn as well, along with the rook. So Capablanca is starting to make inroads to his opponent's side of the board here. It's starting to look a little dangerous for Alekhine. So what will Alekhine do next? Well, he gets his rook to safety, also lining up on this pawn with the queen. And now we have a brilliant move here. Brilliant move by Capablanca, placing his knight on a square where the pawn is attacking it. The knight is also threatening to jump forward, or excuse me, jump back to c5, targeting the rook and the bishop at the same time. Also, an attack on this pawn, with a threat of maybe pushing forward here with the queen, or pushing over and attacking, threatening a mate. So the best move, according to the computer, is bishop over to b5 here, attacking the queen. But what does Alekhine do? Does he find that move? Yes. Now, let's see what would have happened if the knight is captured. So if that knight is captured, it would be losing for Alekhine, a blunder, because now we have only one move that works here. Rook to f8, threatening a mate here because the queen is covering that square. So it looks like the only thing that would be possible is rook to f7, and then of course that rook could be captured. So back to what actually happened in the game. Alekhine finds the best move, counterattacking the queen here, and now we have queen to c8. So the best move being found. The queen moves out of the line of fire of the bishop, counterattacks the rook here. So what will Alekhine come up with now? Well, he finds the best move, rook to e7, targeting the knight here. So knight back to f8, another great move by Capablanca. So Capablanca is just outplaying his younger opponent here. This is before Alekhine becomes the great future world champion and defeats Capablanca. And that doesn't happen until, I think around the year 1927. So, that's still quite a ways off here, as this game took place in 1914. And Capablanca ends up becoming world champion in 1921 when he defeats Emanuel Lasker. And, in the future, I should probably have games. I've done a game series on Bobby Fischer, Jose Capablanca, and Mikhail Tal, but I should definitely do Lasker, the second world chess champion, and Alekhine, the fourth world chess champion. So in the future, I'll do some game series on both of those players. All right, the king steps into the line of fire here. Now, we can have a discovered attack once that knight moves, but there is the blocking move with the rook here, backed up by the bishop, so that's possible. So let's see what happens here. Knight to d7 is played, blocking that move now, because the knight interferes with that line of the bishop to e8 here. So Alekhine does not have the blocking counterattack. Now the best move is king to h7, just running. And now queen to c5. A mistake here by Capablanca. What is he thinking about doing here? Well, maybe he was thinking if the rook captured, the queen could capture the bishop. But, it almost appears that the bishop could capture, but if that happens, the queen would capture the rook. So, the best move here, and Capablanca is still ahead after this move by the equivalent of half a pawn, even though he's actually ahead by 1 pawn. So let's see what Alekhine does. Does Alekhine find the best move? Yes. He decides to defend the rook, counterattack White's rook. So a lot more going on in this game, and there is one move here, one move that keeps the edge with Capablanca. It looks like queen to f5 check. So, whenever you're looking at tactics and different attacks, always keep an eye out for any checks that could cause you difficulties. So, sure enough, Capablanca checks while also defending his rook. He's still keeping an eye on this bishop and his knight. So the queen is doing a great job here, around the center of the board, attacking. So the game continues with a blunder. Too much pressure, I guess. A blunder here by Alekhine, and we'll see why it was a blunder. Apparently g6 would have been better. To just counterattack the queen, block the attack. So it would have been better to block here, and then knight. That would allow knight to f6, check, king to g7, and then let's see, queen to f4, or queen to c5. So the queen would have to get out of the line of fire of that pawn, and Capablanca would just maintain his slight edge. But after this pretty much losing blunder here, let's see how Capablanca continues. Well, the best move is to just go ahead and capture the bishop here. And of course, that is what Capablanca does. He finds this he finds this move which the computer deems a brilliant move here. So another brilliant move by Capablanca, because now it looks like the queen can just capture the unprotected rook here. So this move is played, which the computer says is good, but a6 would have been better, which would allow this rook to be saved. So let's see what happens if this is captured. So if that were to be captured, we have queen to b8 check, and if the king runs, now there is check with the knight, and this is forcing. The king would have to move. The king can't go here, of course, because the knight is covering that. So if the king comes back up, well, now we have knight to d7 check. And it says that is good, but knight to g6 would have been better. So let's take a look at that real quick, because that targets the rook here. So apparently rook to e8, then the queen would capture. Or if the king runs, then the knight can just capture. And also keep in mind, or take a look, that this diagonal is protected by Capablanca, preventing any future checks by the queen along that diagonal. Trying to go for some type of perpetual check. Now, the other move, let's see here, where were we? If I go back. So we had that check. The king would have to go up to g8. And here, knight to g6 is best. It says you can also go here. Now what? If the king goes back, they just recommend this move again, checking again. And we saw how that could lead to capturing the rook here. All right, in the game, let's see what happened. Okay, if we go back a little bit and take another look at these brilliant moves, we'll go back a little further here. So, this was the mistake by Capablanca, which allowed this counterattack on the rook, but we have a check. The king runs up a blunder, allowing capture, and so the game continued with rook attacking the queen here, and now that rook is on the open file and can deliver a back rank attack, and the queen will have to move and protect this. So queen sidesteps, protecting the rook, which is under attack by the queen, and so the game continues with check to the king. King runs for its life, another check, and now we have the blocking move, and here queen centralizes, the best move in the position, and once again guarding this diagonal here, preventing any perpetual shenanigans. So there is the possibility of trading off queens, but Capablanca is ahead by that pawn. So let's see what happens. We have f6, attacking, capture by Capablanca. And apparently that's the best way to go for Alekhine. Now he's just down another pawn. So the game continues with queen attacking. Now this will force a trade of queens. And then after the rook checks, another pawn will fall. And now this is where the game ended. So Capablanca just ends with equal pawns on the king side, but 3 pawns here, 3 passed pawns with the help of the rook. And, if the king moves up into the center of the board, these pawns will just march forward and black will not be able to stop all of them. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that interesting game of Alekhine and Capablanca before they were world chess champions. Capablanca, this is 1914 when this game took place, so 7 more years, Capablanca will become world chess champion after he defeats Lasker. And then that's in 1921. And then I think in 1927, Alekhine defeats Capablanca and becomes the next world chess champion. And they, I don't know if they liked each other very well. Once Alekhine becomes world champion, he kind of avoids a rematch with Capablanca. And I don't think Capablanca, ever gets a chance to replay Alekhine for the World Chess Championship. All right. Anyway, feel free to leave comments. I always enjoy hearing from viewers and subscribers. Like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and have a super chess day.